So we're on page Reish Mem, toward the bottom. Specifically, we are about 12 lines up. The line begins, or misyashiv bekeli shaloi. But where we really begin is bir inyan, the explanation of the inyan. So what are we dealing with here? We spent a lot of time discussing the distinctions between the, well, first of all, general principle. We have toyu and we have tikkun. In order to understand what they are and the distinctions between the two, the fundamental foundational features involve the relationships of or to keli. So in olam hatoyu, the or is intense and the keli is small, and in olam hatikkun, it's the other way around. The kelim are broad, and the or is somewhat more diminutive, somewhat more reduced. So how do we understand this? The first thing we've done is tackle the union of kelim. What means katnus keli? What means a small keli? What means a broad keli? The Rebbe has very briefly taken us into a little terminology here that the kelim of toihu are igulim. Eagle is a circle, and a circle has no. Every point on the circle is the same. The circle has no beginning, no end. There's no right, there's no left, there's no north, there's no south. It is a continuum, and therefore it is a very fine analogy or a very fine metaphor for describing the kelim of toihu, because it takes things b'derech klal. It's not something that makes distinctions and borders. It's not something. It does not receive light in an analytical, particularized way. It takes inyan and beklal. The example the Rebbe used was that of a child, the mind of a child. You contradict a child's will, that's bad. You give a child a candy, that's good. There's nothing in between. No good can be seen in the bad, and no bad could be seen in the good. It's black and white, it's derech klal. And the mind of the child, being an eagle, encompasses entirely, and there's no room for anything other than the klal which the mind of the child encompasses. So the child becomes permeated with absolute pure anger or absolute pure delight. Children are extremists. It's an indication, it was brought in L'Kutei Diburim in the first Chalik, that this is a sign of an immature chitzonistic type of a person also. A person tends to exaggerate, sees things in a light that is much better than they really are, or disparages something as being much worse than it really is. They fail to see distinctions. That's the nature of the kelim of toyu. It's of a small keli, which is not capable of seeing particulars and specifics. And of course the kelim of tikkun are just the opposite. They are able to receive light and able to see distinctions and dimensions and possibilities within that light. They're even able to see, to distinguish contradictions within the or, and there are always contradictions. Life is complicated. The truth includes everything, so you're bound. There's no such thing as pure chesed or pure gevura. In the chesed, there's got to be some gevura, otherwise it's not a real chesed. And in the gevura, there's got to be some dimension of chesed. And a broad keli is able to see the specifics, the details, and therefore the response of the keli, or the response of the individual, is a much more nuanced response, much more mature response, not nearly as intense. I mean, in a sense, the child's response is pure. It's absolutely pure, because the child sees only one thing. It's black and white. An adult, or a broad keli, the kelim of tikkun, do not see things that way. They see things as multi-dimensional, and therefore the intensity of the chesed is less, and the intensity of the gevura is less, because it's buffered by other considerations in the same instance. The Rebbe gave many examples of this. So this is the inyan of igul v'yosher. The inyan of toyu is the inyan of igulim, and the inyan of tikkun is the inyan of yosher. The explanation of the thing is like this. One could say, al derech klal, generally, al derech klal v'prat. We could see this whole concept in a way of klal v'prat. She'ein b'haprat elo ma shebaklal. There's nothing no prat comes into recognition. No prat emerges that's not in a klal. And that by the same token, the klal has nothing in it other than the pratim that come out of it. So in a sense, the Kalim of Tohu and the Kalim of Tikkun are dealing with the same thing, except it's the same subject, the same or in a sense, except here it's taken in a way of klal, and the pratim are not nirgish, they're not felt, they're not distinguished, and therefore the real meaning of the or is not fully appreciated. It's taken there a klal. The Olam HaTikkun, on the contrary, the Kalim of Tikkun, broad Kalim, are able to see the dimensions within the pratim and the specifics and the details. Now they're not seeing anything that isn't there in the klal. The only thing is they're able to look in depth and to take it the panemius and to look at that aura and see the nuances within the klal. There's nothing new. A prat coming out of a klal is not a chiddush. But whatever comes out in terms of pratim, that's what's in the klal. You can't have anything coming out that's not in the klal, and by the same token, nothing is going to. The klal contains within everything that can be recognized and appreciated as a prat. Whatever is in the klal will come out individualized and distinguished as a detail, as a prat, as a specific. El shahaklal hu kitsurei shel dover. The thing is, the klal is a kitzer. The klal is an overall. It's a tamsis. It's a summary. It's a general kitzer, general summary of the content of that or. Kitzurei shel davar. V'tamsis kol shoder she'inyan. The whole inyan is summarized briefly by the klal. The example the Rebbe used, L'moshel, was the relationship of Mishnah to Gemara. The Mishnah, in a sense, is a klal from which a couple of lines of Mishnah, you have pages and pages and pages of Gemara, which are pratim, which emerge from the Mishnah. But again, there's nothing new. The difference between the klal and the prat is not a chiddush. It's simply a matter of how the or is grasped. Yes.
It's interesting because spoken about that there's the union of the klal before the prat and the klal after the prat.
Two different things.
Right.
The klal.
Here he seems to be saying that to tell you.
What you think
the klal before the prat.
What you're thinking of is not really the klal after the prat, the klal before the prat. What you're thinking of is the nakuda sichlis before it's turned into pratim by bina.
Right.
And then after all the pratim are considered and everything is said and done and Bina has worked on it fully and totally, you now get back to the point of a klal. It's now encompassed. It's
about, sort of what he's saying here.
Sort of. I mean, it's a somewhat different inyan.
Yeah, that's my question.
It's a somewhat different inyan because the two nakudas, the nakuda before his chalkus into pratim of Bina, and the nakuda afterwards, nakuda atamsis, the summary nakuda afterwards, are not identical.
Right, exactly.
They're not. But in this case, the klal is nothing other than the sum of the pratim. So they're not really quite the same thing. But it's a good point. Umash and if acher kach. What after that you have? So you have the klal, which is the source of everything. What comes out afterwards? Lahar b'diburim einam mechadash dover. What and the words of many words that come out of this, and whatever details and specifics come out, not a chiddush, nothing new. Ki im sheyifra v'yegale tamune umitzfunim shebehelam klal. This is Gilui Helam. Klal v'prat is Gilui Helam. The pratim are not undergo no change in emerging from the klal, and the klal essentially is the sum total of the pratim. So you're dealing with a situation. I guess the irony is it's a very ironic situation because here you have Tohu and Tikkun, which are very, very opposite. They're totally distinct one from the other. They function in totally different ways. In a sense, they're dealing with the same or, but they're dealing with the or in very, very different ways. This gives us a little bit of a smell already that we talk about the union of tikkun. There's tikkun of the keli, there's tikkun or. But the ikar is the tikkun of the keli. The ikar is how the or is going to be received, how it's going to be taken. Similarly with Olam HaTov, we have in Olam HaTikkun Yud Nekudais, the 10 Nekudais. Nekuda is or, which is a klal. There's no hispashtus. Take the letter yud in Lashon HaKodesh. All the other ices, actually every ice begins with a yud, because as soon as you touch a quill to paper, you've already begun a yud. It's a yud. It's a sort of a yud. Not exactly, but sort of. It's a nakuda. Every ice begins with a nakuda, but it's only a nakuda. It doesn't have shape, doesn't have form, doesn't have breadth, doesn't have depth, and therefore all the pratim, it's indicative of the fact. First of all, it's indicative of its tzimtzum, number one, because it's a nakuda. Secondly, it's indicative of the fact it's like the eagle. It's like like a klal. It's a seed which contains within itself numerous pratim. But as those pratim exist in the yud itself, they're all behelim, and the yud itself is a klal. Now, yud actually isn't really an ideal example of a klal, because the yud, in fact, has form to it. There's the body of the yud, there's kotzei shel yud, the thorn of the yud which goes up, and there's the thorn of the yud that goes down. So yud it's not like a nukuda stam. Nukuda stam, l'moshel, yud is indicative, for example, of chochmah, which is a flash, which is to use the word klal isn't exactly right, but it is an intense seminal point of brilliance, undifferentiated, but not completely undifferentiated. It's shayach to the chochmah stamah, which gave rise to it. That's the thorn of the yud that goes up, and it's shayach to be meluvish and bina. That's the thorn that goes down. And Chochmah, as in the case of all spheres of Tikkun, have there's Chesed sheb'Chochmah, Gevur sheb'Chochmah, Chochmah sheb'Chochmah, Bina sheb'Chochmah. So even though it is a seminal, undifferentiated flash of light, concealed within are these distinctions, and these distinctions are already indicated by the shape of the letter Yud. Nakuda Stam has no shape altogether. It would be a Keser l'mashal. It's a Nakuda Stam. It is totally undifferentiated, not shaykh to anything but panemius. And this is the union of a nakuda. So in the case of toihu, the oiros are nakudos. They're taken as nakudos. They're taken, and doesn't mean nakuda of the yud, it means a nakuda stam, a plain point. They are totally undifferentiated or. There's a nakuda which is the essence of chesed, there's a nakuda which is the essence of gevura, there's a nakuda which is the essence of netzach, hoid. And these nukudos, in fact, are ksarim. The whole concept of the or of toyu, the oris of toyu, is that you have 10 ksarim, 10 emanation of 10 particular specific attributes in their most intense, pure, undifferentiated form. Chesed is absolute chesed. It's keser of chesed. Gevura is keser of gevura. And what does this mean? It means that Keser of Chesed is pure, and Keser of Chesed emerges mamish from Olam HaKudim, which we'll hear a little bit about later on, from above. And here I am. All of a sudden there's this possibility of Gevurah. Who are you? I am what is wanted. I am the king. That's what it is. And Gevurah is the same story. They cannot admit of each other. They cannot know of each other because they have no contact with each other. They have no way of relating to each other because the particulars and specifics, which are deeply, deeply concealed within that or, are totally concealed. And therefore, the only thing that's revealed is the pure intensity of the spirits, of the or itself. Or kloli. This is or kloli. It's a general. It's a general or, an or which is not particularized in any. It was undifferentiated. Bli hischalkus pratim. There are no pratim in this or. Shabah v'kamay midas hachesed. For example, midas hachesed. Hayu b'chinas hakeser shabah. So we have chesed. The or of chesed of toihu is a keser. The or of gevura of toihu is a keser. Keser is undifferentiated. A keser is a nakuda. A keser is the most intense, pure expression of light. And this is the cause of the shviras. We'll see a little bit later on. By the time you get to tikkun, that's not the case. The or comes in a way of many, many pratim. And what teases out the pratim, what makes for pratim, is the property and quality of the keli, as we can imagine for ourselves. The pratim which are there, it's not that the nakuda of chesed, of toihu, lacks pratim. that is a brilliant flash of chesed which is absolutely pure, absolutely uniform, and absolutely undifferentiated. It's not the case. It's just expressed that way. In fact, in that Kesser are other possibilities, but those other possibilities are so obliterated and inundated by the intense aura of Kesser that they are not available. They are not nirgish. They are not felt. They are not recognizable. It's a flash, and in that flash, these possibilities are simply lost. They're totally concealed and hidden. And therefore, what you get is the absolute intensity of Chesed or the absolute intensity of Gevurah. Mind you, this is what we mean by miyut ha'or. By the time you get to Tikkun, so the intensity is reduced. The intensity is reduced. Now one can start to see, in that or, there's this and there's that and there's that, and there's the implications of this or and the possibilities within the or, and it becomes a whole different story. Let's see. Vatikan who ha'ora beribri pratim. In Tikkun, the aura comes in a particularized, nuanced way. The aura is seen for all the dimensions that are within it. They emerge from concealment. Shenifratu ha'pratim shabar klali. That and where do they come from? The aura klali. They don't come from anywhere other than the aura of Chesed, the Kesser of Chesed. But now they become recognizable. They can become felt. Tremendous paradox of course. A very famous, common feature in Hasidus, particularly Hasidus Chabad. Bigger is not better. Higher is not better. Because the aura of Toyu is much higher than the aura of Tikkun. The aura of Toyu is far more intense than the aura of Tikkun. But more and bigger are not better. The aura of Tikkun is aura which can be internalized, which means to say that it can be used in productive ways and it can be actualized in fulfilling the will of the Rebbeinu Shalom. The aura of Toyu, wonderful. I mean, it's very, I don't mean to make fun of it, it's very extremely holy level. But you can't do anything with it. It's not an or which is going to come down in the whole tachlis of creation as that or should come down. There goes without saying then that there's a possibility for scholars. If already there's an inyan of Gevurah in the or of Chesed, then for sure there's an inyan of Chesed in the or of Gevurah. We're brothers. We understand you. We can work together. We can operate in synchrony here. If, on the other hand, I'm Chesed and I'm Gevurah, wait a minute, Chesed and Gevurah are water and fire. There's no way you're going to get them together. Chesed is comprised also of some Gevurah, and Gevurah can be found in Chesed as well. Why is this? So why here you have a Nakuda, you have this Kesser, you have this Or Kloli, this brilliant flash of pure, undifferentiated light. Here already you have a light which has dimensions and has levels and has aspects to it, has facets to it. It's all the Keli. It's the Keli what makes the light what it is. Don't forget, we go back to earlier Parakim in this Hemshech. Who is driving everything? It's the Keli. The nature of Or is to be nostalgic lamayla. The nature of Dveikus. The nature of Or is histalkus. The nature of Or is aliyah. And therefore, whatever is elicited by a Keli. The Shorosh of Kalim is higher than the Shorosh of Or. The kind of Keli you have, that's the kind of Or you're going to elicit. So the Kalim of Toyu, being that they're Igul, and being that it's Katnas HaKeli, being that they're immature, they're dimensionless, they're incapable of taking anything except Derech Klal, as an immediate superficial impression. That's the way they see things. What are they going to? What kind of are they going to get? They're going to get the aura of a superficial, intense impression. That's what they're going to get. On the other hand, the mature Kalim of Tikkun, being that they are Kalim which are designed to sense within Or and to reveal within Or all possibilities and dimensions of the Or, that's the Or that they're going to bring down, that they're going to get. So really, again, we go back to this constant feature that seems to be that everything hinges. It's not exactly true, but the Keli seems to be the dominant determinant as to what's going to happen with the Or. That receives the Or in a way of specifics and particulars. Okay, so that we go on now to the next mimer in this Hemshech, continuing on the same subject, obviously. Koyamar Hashem, this is from Yeshaya, very well-known pasuk, constantly recurring throughout Chassidus. Koyamar Hashem, Barei Hashemayim, so says Hashem, the creation of the heavens. Who Elokim, who happens to be the Rabbanu Shalom, who Elokim, Yoitzer Haaretz, the former of the earth, who Yoitzer, wait a minute, Elokim, Yoitzer Hu Oise. This is, he does, Loi Soihu Bara. He did not create it for Soyu. Soyu means chaos. Toyu, Lashon Toyu. I did not create it for Toyu. I did not create the world for the sake of Toyu. L'sheves Yotzra, Ani Hashem. I created it for that it should be settled, that there should be a settlement. I formed it that it should be coming in Behis Yashvus, that the world should be maintained and sustained in a settled, methodical, systematic way. Ani Hashem, Ani Hashem Einoid. I am Hashem. There's no one else. A couple of things about the pasuk before we move on. You'd think that he created the world for Tohu. I mean, the Yeshaya has to spend his nevuah telling you, Rabbi Sai, you know something? The Rebbeinu Shalom through me is saying, I did not create the world for Tohu. I created it for Tikkun. Tikkun is his yashvus. Tikkun is systematic. Tikkun is settled. That's what I created it for. You think otherwise? You might. Because the artists of Tohu are so holy, they're higher.
Well, the fact is, Hashem created the world first with Midas Hadin, and it couldn't.
That's another story. You're right. That's true. But that's something a little bit different.
Yeah, the Tohu before Tikkun.
But Tohu was created before Tikkun. That fits into that. That's right. But here specifically, you think about the artists of Tohu. The artists of Tohu are. Look, the artists of Tohu were what attracted Nodav Avihu. You know, here you've got Loi Soihu Vara. They thought of, who's the Rebbeinu Shalom? Who is Yeshaya talking to? He could have been talking to them. Came a little bit late, but he could have been talking to them because they did think this. They saw they had a yearning. They had an Ahava Rabbah, Ahava Tanugim, however you want to call it, Kleis Nefesh, a yearning for Hashem. They had a Ratzai for Atzma Sein Soif, which is way beyond an or which can come down Behis Yashvus, which by definition it has to be limited and restricted to be able to be settled and ingested and developed into lower worlds. They're not called lower worlds for anything, for nothing. So here you have two Gewaldige Tzaddikim who should have been told this, that the Rebbeinu Shalom did not create the world for Tohu. For you to have an aliyah, for you to have a der be'elyoinim. The whole point is for the Rebbeinu Shalom to have a der b'tachtoinim. But the mistake could be made because the oiris of Tohu, the oilam hatohu, is an extremely lofty level, and in the soul of a tzaddik, it could be intensely felt. The Rabbanim who entered the Pardes, the four Rabbanim who entered the Pardes, only Rabbi Akiva went in b'sholem and came out b'sholem. The others didn't listen to Yeshaya. The world is not created for your mystical dveikus with Atzma Sein Soif. The world is made for schlepping Atzma Sein Soif mamish into Oilamais in a way in which the Oilamais can stand. It's interesting. I have a very close friend. We learn once a week. He became very much involved in Limud Chassidus. We're learning Ayin Beis. He has a very substantial background in Kabbalah, and he has superb teachers. He's, by Kabbalah, I mean real Kabbalah. He's not a Makubal, but he's a serious student of Kabbalah. And the men on whom he relies as teachers and mentors are well-known, serious scholars of Kabbalah, and he knows a great deal. It's a whole story. I don't want to go into the whole story now. He became infatuated with Hasidus Chabad, which is very different from the sorts of things that he's been learning. And so one day I asked him, I said, how do you see this? How do you see this? Because actually the Chassidus in Ayin Beis is heavily dependent upon Oisis HaKabbalah. One has to have a foundation in Kabbalah in order to even begin to understand. From my point of view, the point of view of anyone who studies Chassidus, the Chassidus adds dimensions that Kabbalah only hints at, and he's been stunned by many of the insights which he's gotten from the Chassidus. But he said in a general way, Kabbalah shows you the ineffability of Elokus, the elevation of Elokus, the hisnasus of Elokus, and Chassidus. So for Kabbalah, it elevates God in your eyes, and Chassidus brings him down. And I thought that was actually a pretty good way of looking at it. I thought it was, and that's it. The world, Yeshaya is saying as much. I created the world l'shevis, that it should be settled. So that question is settled by who? Well, Ani Hashem Einoid. I am Hashem. There's none else. That puts the seal of truth on this, but it implies something else. Perish from a Mincha Gedoyla gives a whole reference here, which I'm not familiar with. Sheikar Habriya Hu L'Sheves Yotzla. The whole point of Brias Ha'olam is for that the world should be settled. That there should be a hisyashvus of or in Oilamos. Umihu Hayoyshev Ba. Settled by whom? Who's it being made for? The world should be settled by whom? Hu ani Hashem Einoid. That's who. It's for me. It's for, what is this? This is the Yin of Dir B'Tachtoinim. V'nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyos Lo Yisbarach Dir B'Tachtoinim. That Hashem Yisbarach desired Dir B'Tachtoinim. But you need the Navi to come and tell you that the Iker is Olam Hasiyah, the Iker is Hisyashvus, the Iker is Olamais, the Iker is not Ein Sof, the Iker is not Aliyah, the Iker is not these things. What Hashem Yisbarach wants first and thought last, Sof Maisa Machshavat Chila, is worlds or Olamais, which can then become a residence for him. And it's a tough lesson for people to learn, but there it is. So what's the point? The point is to draw Elukus Lamat, to bring Elukus into Olamais. A totally different kavana than having an Aliyah in Ein Sof. Instead of having Aliyah in Ein Sof, the idea is that there should be a Shov which brings Ein Sof down. The explanation of the thing is like this has been explained. The difference is clearly the distinction between Tohu and Tikkun. The Tohu or Kloli. Tohu is an union of or Kloli, as we've learned. A child who cannot tolerate something which goes against his will. That's an or comes into his kalim, and he wants the toy. He's not going to get it. That's bad. Not only it's bad, it's the end of the world. The world has to come to an end because this is the most horrible thing that could possibly happen. There's no good in it. Never mind, do I deserve it? Is it really good that I should have such a thing? Do I really need such a thing? Is it really going to give me pleasure? That's not a tinuk. A tinuk is I want. And if I get, well, then life is beautiful. If I don't get, life is horrible. There's nothing in between. This is because his mayach is small. He cannot understand the nuances and the details and particulars in any particular event that occurs to him. It's not the case of an adult. An adult is able to encompass many dichotomies, many disparities in a situation. Situation happens. Someone does something which is bad for him. So if you had katnas hakeli, bad's bad. That's it. Scream, shriek, yell, punch someone out. And there are those who would do such things. But a keli which has godless, a broad keli, will say, yes, this hurts, but I can see in this, I'm not a tzaddik. This can be a kapara for me. The person who insulted me or injured me, he has his own problems, and you could, at the time of being injured and angry with him, you can have a sense of compassion as well. At the same time, b'shas ma'isa, the Rebbe gave examples of this. And the thing becomes very multi-dimensional, and the intensity of the anger then becomes diluted in the truth of the particulars which are part and parcel of the whole incident. And the person then can learn from it, he can grow from it. Unpleasant things are no less essential to our growth, in fact maybe even more so than the pleasant things.
Aren't you overwhelming the emotions?
Pardon?
Aren't you overwhelming the emotions by having both anger and compassion at the same time?
No, because what happens is the compassion dilutes the anger. You're furious. I mean, I think we can all think of examples. I will not embarrass myself by telling you all my immature things. But someone does something and you're furious, and then you stop to think, something. It's Rachmanis on this person for this reason or for that reason or for the other reason. So now what is, a new dimension has come in compassion, but in fact it's applicable to that person. And the compassion is derivative from the fact that this incident is what elicited the compassion. Only this person does things like this. This person speaks in ways like this. There's a reason for it. And the reason entitles him to your compassion. On the other hand, you're angry. The anger, but the anger is far less intense, and the emotion, Baklal, becomes a much more sophisticated emotion, and it can even become useful. I mean, hopefully, it will become useful. So that's the difference between the broad keli and the katnasei keli. Kama hefchim, the person can bear, simultaneously hold totally dichotomous views, b'nois echad, in one shot at the same time. Whom etzad reicha v'keli, because his kelim are broad. U'kamoi kain, similarly, b'chinas hatikin kelim mirachovim, and tikin and oilam atzilus, the kelim are broad, and therefore they are. This is the way they respond to or. And this is the kind of or they elicit. Shabab ribui hischalkus, but ribui pratim. They bring things into many dimensions. They appreciate nuances. They dissect things into the specifics and details to the nth degree. To such an extent that two seemingly contradictory impulses, that of Chesed and that of Gevurah, can be maintained simultaneously in the same time. In one shot, they don't necessarily cancel each other out. In a small child, they have to cancel each other out. If it's bad, it's bad. Don't start giving me arguments that it's good because it's got to be bad. I've got to see it as bad. That's the way it is. Don't make my life complex. But life is complex. But it takes a mature keli, a broad keli, to see that complexity. A few things we have to understand at the outset. Be'inyan, hiskololus ba'olam atikin. In terms of the hiskololus ba'olam atikin, shechesed korel megvura, ugevura mechesed. Very nice. So in Tikkun, the world of Atzilus, we have hiskololus. In the meat of Chesed, there are dimensions of Gevura. A parent punishes a child. Why does the parent punish? As far as the child is concerned, who take things b'derech klal, the child doesn't know why, but it's bad. I went into this in some detail before, so I'm not going to. I won't repeat it. But to a parent, the same love that motivates the giving of a candy or a pat on the head or a kiss, it's the same love motivates the punishment. It's all for the good of the child. It's for the benefit of the child. Child is not capable of seeing those nuances in the behavior. But in the Oilam Atikin, there's Gevurah, which is included within Chesed. There's Chesed, which is included in Gevurah. Ad bli daim. There's just no end of interactions and self-inclusions. As it had been explained, which is understandable, has been explained in terms of the gadol of the adult who is able to take two opposite impulses in one instance. This is the famous example of Shaul that the Rebbe gave, that there was a famine in the land. David HaMelech wanted to find out why. It took him 3 years to find out why. Why? There are two reasons why. Hashem answered David HaMelech through the Urim V'Tumim, and he answered him, there are two reasons why you are being punished, why the Jewish people are being punished. Number one, because of Shaul, because he was not given a proper hesped, as befits a king of Israel, chosen by God himself. And the second, because of Shaul, because he murdered off the Gevonim. He destroyed the Gevonim. Actually murdered the Kayanim of Noiv, but the Gevonim were dependent upon them for a livelihood, and therefore it's as if he murdered the Gevonim. So those are two totally antithetical things. And you could say, well, one should really cancel out the other. And this is the way modern politics works, right? All right, so we didn't get a hesped, nishkeferla, but look what he did to the Gevonim. Or someone else will come along and say, forget about the Gevonim, who are they after all? But meanwhile, he didn't get it's got to be one of, no, it's both. Both of them are real, both of them are true, both of them are encompassed in the same action, the same response, which is the famine. Both require tshuva. Even though they're totally antithetical, you'd think they would cancel each other. This is evil and this is good. They should cancel each other out. There shouldn't be a famine, there shouldn't be anything. So whatever Shaul did which was good is negated by what he did to the Gevonim. Whatever he did was bad to the Gevonim is negated by the fact that he was punished by not having a hesped, or he didn't receive a hesped. That's not the way it works. Truth is truth, and truth is dimensions. Truth is particulars, truth is specifics. All this is all of this is applicable to what? To Kalim primarily, not exclusively, but particularly to Kalim. The concept of the Chesed Shebegavur and the Gavur Shebechesed. Are we talking about Or? Are we talking about Kalim? We're talking primarily about Kalim, the ability of self-inclusion of all attributes in a single attribute. This is primarily a function of Kalim. What that there we find that the cause of the capacity to bear two heptim, two totally antithetical impulses. This is because of the breadth of the keli. So it's the breadth of the keli which seems to be the determining factor in this entire mode of behavior and revelation.
That creates a pratim.
It does not create the pratim. It elicits the pratim. The pratim are there. The pratim are in the klal. Pratim are in the or.
That means there's pratim in or?
Oh, absolutely.
So or is Mitzuyer?
No, not necessarily. It isn't. There's not seer, not necessarily. Well, I mean, it depends how you want to look at it. But the fact is that or contains within itself possibilities. There is, after all, or of chesed. There is, after all, or of gevurah. Now, whether you want to say that's an or of atzma, as in the case of Ayin Beis, which says Esesiris Haganuzas or Esesiris and or you want to take the other shita, which is that or is Pashut B'tachas Shitas, but it picks up the Inyan of Chesed or Gevurah, let's say, on its passage through Isis or Rishima or elsewhere through the Kalim of Keser or the Levushim of Keser, however you want to look at it, Isis Hakika, doesn't really matter. The fact is, by the time or hits Toihu, or certainly by the time it hits Tikkun, there are possibilities within the or. Oval yesh lohaven ba'or atzma eich yimotze boi beis happen. There's your question. Rabbi said, well, where in or do you find two opposites? I could see in Keli, but where in or do you find two opposites? For example, Chesed and Gevurah, or of Chesed and or of Gevurah. Mailu Mata, higher and lower. Where do you get distinctions in or? Or by the way we look at or, and the definition of or is that it's Pajat. Or is Ein Sof, or is Ein Sof. Bli Gvul, that's or. Where come these distinctions in or which the Kalim are eliciting? Hillel and Shammai, they had the same Rebbe, same Rebbes, Shmai V'Avtalyan. They'd sit in Beis Medrash, they would hear a shir, they would come out, and Hillel would say Mekel, and Shammai would say Machmir, or would say Chayiv. They heard the same thing. How does this happen? Because Hillel, as the Kalim of Chesed, Shammai is from the Kalim of Gevurah. But there's got to somewhere be in the message, the original message, even though it seems Pajat, there's got to be Chesed and Gevurah in the or itself, in the message itself, because otherwise Hillel would not be able to extract a message of Chesed. Mind, he's looking for it, but it's got to be there, otherwise he wouldn't be able to extract it. Shammai has to be able to extract a message of Gevurah. Otherwise, he wouldn't. They're not inventing things. They're not making things up. Each one will tell you, "I learned this from my Rebbe." Well, if you sit and listen to the Rebbe, you're not going to see either Chesed or Gevurah in anything he said. But it's there. It's there, b'derech klal. It's there, encompassed within in a way of Helam, in a way of Pshitas, in the lesson which the Rebbe gave over. There is Chesed, which is behelam, and there's Gevurah, which is behelam. Hillel, being from the Kalim of Chesed, the Kalim of Chesed, is going to find that Chesed, and Shammai is going to find the Gevurah. But where did they get it from? They got it from the original or.
Why do we have to say that?
Because otherwise they invented it, and they didn't. They are transmitting.
I'm taking an idea, and through my glasses, the way I'm looking at it one way. You're looking at it a different way.
But the one way and the other way has to be there. If it's not there,
why? Because it, so then it can be looked at this way.
But it's not. But that's the point. It's not Pashut, and if it's Pashut, you can't look at it anyway. There are no ways. If it's really Pashut. That's the point. That by the time the or is Pashut, there is Chesed and Gevurah. The only thing is they're bittul betachlis. It's Pashut vis-a-vis Kalim. The artists of Atzilus are Pashut with respect to the Kalim that they're meluvish within, but they're not really Pashut. You still have or of Chesed. You still have or achlifa dochtayu. Or of Chesed and Keli of Gevura. Or is not Poshet. I mean, it is, but the or we're talking about is not. V'yechi yisbaru yachad, yischavu yachad. How is it that they are able to come together? You find two hepchim, hug and mailu mata, all these things. Number one, and how and two questions. First of all, where does that come from? Number two, how is it possible that they could be united together to function in chesed, the or of chesed, the or of gevura? Shari hamashal now. The mashal of this begodl, the adult. We go back to that. Ein atam elu l'sibis hasavlonis shezeh shaykh lahakeli. The time that we've been given, the mashal we've given, is the cause is the savlonis, the ability, the capacity, which is shaykh to the keli, to accept two hepchim, two antithetical types of or. This doesn't deal with the concept of or. This doesn't relate to or in its essential way. Atzmius gufa shel davar. So yes, the keli is able to bear both, but the question is, how is there both to begin with, and how do they function together? Leaving kalim out of it. We're talking about the nature of or itself. How does or itself function? There's another mashal here. This is the mashal of Malach Mochel, Malach Gavriel, Sar Shel Mayim, V'Sar Shel Eish. Malach Mochel is Sar Shel Mayim, Chesed, and Malach Gavriel, Sar Shel Eish, Gevura. And these guys do not. This is emes. I mean, Malach Mochel is Chesed. There's no question about that. Gavriel is Taka Gevura. They're in conflict. They're poshet in conflict. They're dichotomous. How come they don't put each other out? How come they don't extinguish each other? They don't go together. How are you going to find these two malachim operating in concert, in synergy, helping each other? How can it be? Well, it's all in essence the keli. The broad keli allows for bearing both chesed and gevura. But that doesn't answer the question. That answers the question how the keli can tolerate both, how the keli can reveal both and accept both. But there are both, which goes back to what Rachmil was saying. There's not just the or is not poshet. There are both. At the relates to the way we're discussing it. Or hagvura mitzad atzmai. Or chesed v'atzad atzmai, or gevura mitzad atzmai. Hein beis chepim. Vein yisachtu. They're two antithetical types of gilui. How are you going to put them together? How do they reside together? How do they fit together? Mitzad or, not mitzad the keli. There's another problem here. So we have two questions. Now we have a third one. Moreover, we have to understand this whole concept of or v'keli is difficult. How does or go with kalim? How does or of chesed go with or of gevura? How does any or go with keli? Same story. You've got antithetical things here. Shahari or shuhu hashpa tevay lehistalik l'mayim. The nature of or is it's a type of emanation, the nature of which is dveikus, is rising above, cleaving to its source. That's its teva. Ba'atzmusayd in atzmus. That's why the sun, the light of the sun in the sun breaks down as a metaphor. It doesn't work. It's very good for certain things, but it doesn't really, in no way conveys the idea that or is not in the getter v'spashus. The nature of or is not to diffuse. The nature of or is dveikus. It feels its source. Its nature is that it is bound to its source, and it would never leave its source unless there were another element drawing it out. Keli, on the other hand, is just the opposite. It receives hashpa tevoi b'yerida, liyeridis hashpa l'hagbila. It's the nature of or is the nature of aliyah, and the nature of zekas. Keli is just the opposite. The nature of keli is the nature of yerida and the nature of hagbala. It's not ein soif. It's quite the opposite. It's restriction. It's limitation. It's yerida. It's mitzias. Everything or is not. That's what keli is. And everything that keli is, that's what or is not. V'imkein yikara or b'shem ma'ila For this reason, or is called Maila, or comes Mila Maila, and Keli is Mashpia Lamata. Keli is Mata. Va'inyan. Shemashpia Tevoi Lahalois Be'ilui Acher Ilui Bats Musa, which is to say that or, its nature is to ascend. Oh, I'm sorry, no, it's not or. Va'inyan, thing is like this. This is a mushal. Sorry, the guy got trapped in the language. Hamashpia. Tevoi lahalois be'ilui acher ilui ba'atz musa. A mashpia, basar v'dam. What is his nature? His nature is to be in a state of constant ascent. A maskil, a baal moychen. What is his approach to gilui? Constantly ascending, constantly withdrawing. As soon as he understands one level, he's reaching for another. And after that level, he's reaching for another. He's a man who is moving constantly within his own mind, upward, endlessly and ceaselessly. That is his teva. That's the nature. That's the nature of intellectual. He doesn't want to be bothered by anybody. On the contrary, his whole being is reaching level after level, understanding deeper and deeper, higher and higher, in more depth, and the man is in a constant state of withdrawal, in a sense. The light of his intellect is constantly ascending. That's his nature. It's his teva. What's going to induce him to turn around and go the other way? On the contrary, take this or, which he yearns for higher and higher levels of abstraction, higher and higher levels, and to go the other way and take the or and bring it down to lower and lower levels, to levels of limitation, to levels of restriction, to levels of concealed in misholim, his meluvish in levushim, and schlep this or, which his whole life is in a state of ascent, into lower and lower levels, and drag it to mamish, to the nth degree down below. Totally unnatural sort of a thing. The Makabel, on the other hand, that's what he wants. So the mashpia by teva, by nature, we're not saying it's what he does, otherwise it wouldn't be a mashpia. But this is his teva. The teva of the Makabel is just the opposite. He wants the or schlepped down. And not only schlepped down, but could you take it down a step further? So how does this, and he wants it brought down in every detail. He wants the or schlepped into every single facet, so his little mind can grasp every single detail of that or, which implies a constant lowering and a constant suffusion of that or into details and in specifics, which this Makabel is interested in. Which brings the or lower and lower and lower, more and more diminutive, more and more concealed. And that's the nature of the Makabel. That's what a Makabel wants. Such being the case, we have to understand, by what cause? So now the question is, what now is the motivation of the mashpia? The mashpia is called a mashpia because that's what he does. He does what the Makabel wants. But why should he? It's contrary to his teva. Therefore, what is the force acting on him that he should go contrary to his teva, and his mind should work in the opposite direction? Instead of ascending constantly to higher levels of seichel, that he should take the seichel and bring it down to constantly lower levels of hislapshus and helam and simtsum and parsais and what have you. So you say, wow, that sounds like a painful process. If the whole life of the man is a liyah in seichel, to go downstairs is a painful process. Rebbe said it is not b'derech oinus. This is not a forced situation. He doesn't sign, say, oh, Gewalt, if I don't do this, I'm not going to get paid, or whatever. The motivation is not a negative one. Oinus means being forced. With eish hagashmi, it's forced, it's stuck. It does not want to be where it is. The Eish HaGashmi is on a wick of a candle, and you can just see that flame going up and down, trying to get off that wick, so it can be nostalgic and dovek b'makar, which is Eish HaYusoidi L'mayla. That's what it wants. It's stuck there. It's not done with simcha and will. It's contrary to its essential nature. Even though its whole teva is histalkus l'mai, the fire is to ascend above, it's forced to be on the wick. Nechaz b'psila hefech teva, which is contrary to its nature. Ad shemakalu esa psila, till such a time as it finishes off the wick and the candle, and then it's free to go. Nemar ba'or shehu b'derech hechrech levad. Similarly, to say that the or is in a way of compulsion, only compulsion, she'ein shayach noimer. You can't say that. You can't say that the or is in a state of compulsion. The or is compelled to come down against its teva. It does go against its teva, but it goes against it not in a way of compulsion. We can't say this of or eliki. There is no shefa, there is no diffusion of or, of light, of elukus that isn't accompanied by simcha. The ikar yurida hashefa hu al yedei simcha. On the contrary, the essence of the yurida is al pi simcha. So this makes no sense altogether. We go back to our mashpia. His whole teva is aliyah. The makabel's whole teva is yearns for yurida. So the mashpia has to go against. When we think of ourselves going against our, what is going against our nature? Any of you guys ever go on a diet? That's going against this. Very crude example. Painful. What does it require? It requires discipline. You have to force yourself. It's forced. So you would think this guy's teva is luxuriating in aliyahs and seichel. To go against that, that's hell on earth. No, it's got to be. It's with simcha. It's poshet with simcha. Lamaila, as with or ein soif, which is mashpi and oilamais. Dafke miachar sheyurida or b'chinas rotzen v'cheshek ech yistatef im hepchi. Being yudei simcha. Dafke umeachar, since the yurida of the or is in a way of rotzen v'cheshek. It comes on the contrary. It's not a forced situation. How is it then combined with its opposite? In this case, the keli. How does that work? Achrei-Inyan. We'll Mitzvah Hashem continue next time with the Achrei-Inyan. I'm going to make a nice mark so I won't forget.